The laws of physics dictate that the Fast and Furious movies are about as realistic as the notion of a reasonably priced Netflix subscription. However, there are other types of laws that govern our universe, more specifically the laws of entertainment. One of them is the first law of filmmaking, which dictates that it's impossible to make a good movie with a bad script, especially if your movie is 3 hours long. Because to hold an audience's attention span for that long with no bathroom breaks, there's no way around it. Competent writing is required, or should be. Since the soul of any movie worth its salt is of course the screenwriting. Other filmmaking aspects like cinematography, soundtrack, acting and directing can only amplify what's already on the page. You know, like icing can enhance an already good cake. However, if your cake is comprised of fecal matter, the icing is kinda pointless. Now, I'm not saying that movie making is all about writing. There are certainly other filmmaking aspects that greatly affect how a movie comes together. All I'm stating is that although it's possible to turn a half-decent story into a great movie through the art of filmmaking, the same cannot be said about turning a bad story into a good movie. Filmmakers are always limited by the quality of what's on the page. Martin Scorsese might be one of cinema's greatest directors, but not even he, if given the opportunity, could make the final season of Game of Thrones good, since the underlying foundation, i.e. the writing, is crap. Or at least so it was thought, since a law is only a law until it is disproven, and disproven it has been, because in the last 6 months alone, 2 movies have been released that completely defy this norm: Avatar: The Way of Water and John Wick 4. Both are around 3 hours long, and both have questionable scripts at best. Avatar's script is so generic and flat that it could have been written by ChatGPT. John Wick 4, on the other hand, does not really have a script, just a collection of directions to take Keanu Reeves from action scene A to B to C and so on. Now, before any of you John Wick fans get your pitchforks out, bear in mind that I am a fellow comrade. I'm not shitting on the movie as a whole, just on this one specific aspect. There are many other incredible qualities that I ascribe to that movie. I just don't think it has much of a story. With all that said, both movies are incredibly successful, making hundreds of millions, or in Avatar's case, actual billions. Both were critically acclaimed, with Avatar even being somehow nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. This would be relevant if Lord of the Rings had came out yesterday, and we were still living in 2004.
And the Oscar goes to The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
A time when the Oscars were synonymous with prestige and elite storytelling, and not a political rally with slap fights organized for history's most pretentious adult pretenders.
If you put your phone down, you'd know that.
Now, I'm not saying that Avatar: The Way of Water and John Wick 4 are the first big-budget movies with bad scripts to make boatloads of money at the box office. They are just the first to also be universally recognized as good movies, which I don't dispute, since I quite enjoyed watching both of them, even if I recognized their narrative shortcomings. So let's start examining this phenomenon by, well, examining Avatar: The Way of Water. Just on a side note, I'm going to refer to this movie as Avatar 2 on this video, because things sure were a lot simpler back in the days of numbered sequels. So as I stated, the script for Avatar 2 is pretty bad. Not insultingly or annoyingly bad, just kind of uninspiringly bad. The story feels driven more by James Cameron's desire to explore the different locations of Pandora than the actual character motivations. Case in point, Jake Sully, being the supreme leader of the Na'vi, immediately decides to abandon his own people to run away with his family at the first sign of trouble. A character decision that feels decidedly at odds with the gung-ho Jake Sully from the first Avatar.
And we will show the Sky people that they cannot take whatever they want. And that this is our land. But they'll never take our freedom.
He's hunting us. I got no plan.
Now don't get me wrong, the decision to sacrifice your own people in order to protect your family is an understandable one, and had the movie explored it further, I would not be here whining about it. But come on, is it too much to ask for some internal conflict in your characters if you have a $1 billion budget? The biggest problem with Avatar's story, however, lies in its generic characters and overly familiar stereotypes. And the more egregious offenders are none other than Jake Sully's true sons, Loak and Neteyam are flatter than most supporting characters in a Fast and Furious movie. One is the stereotypical Boy Scout who does everything his parents tell him to, the other is the stereotypical rebel who does the opposite of whatever his parents tell him to. Which is which, I don't really know. Trying to tell them both apart when watching this movie was a real challenge. Like, why would you design them to look virtually indistinguishable? Or am I some sort of species that thinks all Na'vi look alike? Well, I don't think they have cancel culture in Pandora just yet, so I should be fine. Let's talk about dialogue, more specifically alien teenage PG-13 dialogue. I don't think I have to go into detail as to why the dialogue between the blue teenagers is bad. The words bro and bitch speak for themselves.
Call the punch, bitch! Bro! That was insane, cuz!
Dude.
Having alien indigenous teenagers uttering Earth colloquialisms is about as out of place in this movie as Michael Bay in an art house theater. At this point, they might as well have TikTok dances in Avatar 3. Now don't get me wrong, not all teenagers are bad. Kiri, played by Sigourney Weaver, is likable, doesn't spout annoying dialogue, and actually has a personality that goes beyond the first dimension. Who knew the one character played by a 70-year-old actress would be the most believable teenager in the movie? With all these criticisms out of the way, Avatar 2 is still one of the most successful movies of all time. The reason for this is relatively simple. The CGI more than compensates for its narrative faults and then some.
Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
Turns out you were wrong, George. It is possible after all for a movie to rely entirely on special effects. Before this movie came out, I would have told you that CGI has become so good in the last decade that it's no longer possible to impress audiences with it. I was about as right in that prediction as Back to the Future was in predicting flying cars by 2015. Avatar blows the CGI out of every movie in the last decade out of the water, pun absolutely intended. It's undoubtedly one of the most beautiful movies I have ever seen, and it is hard to dislike, since unlike many of the postmodernist movies that plague movie theaters nowadays, it actually has the courage to take its story seriously, and more importantly, it exists because James Cameron willed it so, and not because some studio executive wanted to squeeze every last ounce of profit out of a recognizable IP. It's a movie that is born from a weird but endearing obsession from cinema's most successful director. So the answer to the billion-dollar question, how do you make a good 3-hour-long movie with a bad script? Make sure that your CGI is the best anyone has ever seen anywhere by a country mile, in a world where good CGI is seen as the norm. There are of course other elements that make Avatar 2 an enjoyable movie despite its story, like the enveloping world of Pandora, the beautiful soundtrack, or James Cameron's direction, but let's be honest, the CGI is what gets it over the line. Anyways, let's talk about John Wick 4 for a minute. I don't want to complain about it too much, other than to say that it could be better if it had a script and actual characters. Instead, it relies solely on Keanu Reeves' charismatic lack of charisma and the greatest action scenes ever recorded in human history. I mean, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat and gunplay, it blows the competition out of the water, or shoots it repeatedly in the head out of the water. Of course, no one goes to watch John Wick 4 because of the story, but hey, I don't go to the restaurant because of the drinks either. That doesn't mean I don't expect to have one.
Where's my drink?
Something Tom Cruise understands all too well, because no matter how incredible the action scenes are in the Top Gun or the Mission Impossible movies, there's still a concerted effort to develop enough of a base story to keep you emotionally engaged in the action scenes. Because like most filmmaking aspects, emotion trumps technique. An action scene that has one emotionally engaged in its outcome trumps an action scene that is technically mind-blowing but hollow in its stakes. With all that said, I will give credit to the writing on this one line uttered by Keanu Reeves.
Loving a husband. That's what I want on mine. John, loving a husband.
It's a subdued, surgically precise encapsulation of who John Wick is as a character. Ultimately, the reason why John Wick and Avatar can have such immense success despite their runtimes and their weak scripts is that both movies exceed so spectacularly, so extraordinarily in their respective technical domains that they've broken the basic laws of filmmaking. Even without a good story, both movies are mandatory viewing for anyone with a Letterboxd account. due to their groundbreaking efforts in CGI and action scenes respectively. So that's it, I don't know how to end videos, so I'll just let Logan Roy see you out now.